Compromise is needed over EU reform, European President Martin Schulz has said during talks with David Cameron at Downing Street. The Prime Minister is hosting President Schulz and later Irish PM Enda Kenny as he continues to press for changes in the UK's relationship with the EU. Mr. Schulz said there were different views about the UK's proposals but also areas of common ground. Mr. Cameron said there was a long way to go but the talks had started well. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the UK must consider what role it wants to play in the European Union. The UK's position will be collectively discussed by European leaders for the first time at the European Council summit starting on June 25. Mr. Cameron has said he wants to speak to all his 27 EU counterparts and other key players to explain his renegotiation aims ahead of the meeting. Senior Tory MPs will also outline their demands for EU changes on Thursday. Common ideas. Mr. Cameron held a breakfast meeting with Mr. Schulz, a German politician who previously led the socialist bloc of MPs in the European Parliament, on Thursday morning. Commenting after the meeting, the European Parliament President said some controversial items were discussed, but common ground could be found in some areas. Dialogue is necessary. Solutions are always coming via dialogue and at the end via compromise, he said. There is a long list of common interests and I think common ground could be found by analyzing and discussing content. That is what we did. There were some controversial items and it is not surprising that in the European Parliament some views are different than here in London, he added. Mr. Schulz said they had discussed how they could stop abuse of welfare systems while ensuring the fundamental rights of citizens under the EU treaties were guaranteed. Mr. Cameron said, "We have got a long way to go in this reform and renegotiation. A lot of difficult issues to discuss, things that I believe fundamentally need to change, but it has been good to start these discussions today." The Prime Minister has said he hopes to secure a better deal for the UK in Europe before putting it to a public vote in an in/out referendum in 2017. Speaking in the German Parliament, Ms. Merkel, it was not the first time that a country has raised doubts about its role in the EU. In 1992 it was Denmark, in 2008 Ireland. "I'm sure we can succeed this time too," she said. The German Chancellor is to ask European Council President Donald Tusk at the EU summit next week to take charge of negotiations with the UK. But she warned, there can be no contradiction of the EU founding principles. Free movement is not up for discussion. Ever closer union. Ahead of the meeting, Mr. Schulz said he wanted to hear some concrete proposals from Mr. Cameron in areas such as welfare, immigration, and the powers of national parliaments. Many on the continent underestimate the importance of the UK and many in the UK underestimate the importance of the continent. "We need to bring these groups together," he told the BBC. He also told The Guardian that Mr. Cameron's hopes of scrapping ever closer union in the EU would require treaty change and that would not happen. Mr. Cameron has embarked on a flurry of diplomatic activity to set out his broad aims and sound out the opinions of other leaders. He has spoken face-to-face with the leaders of Germany, France, Italy, Poland, Belgium, Luxembourg, Spain, and Romania among others. After meeting Mr. Kenny and Mr. Schulz, he will travel to Slovenia. Speaking after talks with Italian PM Matteo Renzi on Wednesday, Mr. Cameron said the pair discussed the importance of reform and change in Europe and had common perspectives and some common ideas on the need for competitiveness and flexibility. Mr. Renzi stressed the importance of the UK remaining in the EU. The European Union for us without the UK is impossible, so we will discuss in the next weeks and the next months about this point, he said. But ahead of Mr. Kenny's visit, current and former Irish ministers have expressed their concerns about the possibility of the UK exiting the EU, ex-Prime Minister Bertie Ahern telling the BBC such a move would be senseless. Black and white. Bulgaria's Foreign Minister Daniel Mitov said the UK needed to set out its objectives in black and white, adding that if the principle of freedom of movement across Europe was preserved, other things could be discussed. Mr. Cameron has insisted the renegotiation process will be conducted at the very highest level and in private, urging people to ignore the inevitable noise surrounding the issue and to focus on the outcome. Leading Conservative Eurosceptics, including Sir Bill Cash, Bernard Jenkin, and John Redwood, will set out their minimum expectations for a reformed relationship in a pamphlet on Thursday. It comes as MPs continue debating the EU referendum bill, which must be approved by Parliament before a vote can take place.